Does Microsoft recall break the law when it comes to your privacy? That's a question I think a lot of people are going to start asking as they start to realize what this actually means. Now, if you don't recall what Microsoft Recall is, it's a new feature that's going to be implemented in newer versions of Windows laptops that have the NPU engine or the NPU chip, aka the Neural Processing Unit. So yeah, we have a CPU, we have a GPU, and now we have an NPU. And basically what Recall does is that it gives the ability of your device to be able to track everything that you do. It'll take a screenshot of everything you do on your device every 3 seconds. And it'll store it locally in a database. Fortunately now, they're going to be having encryption incorporated by default, and by default it's going to be opt-in. So now people say there's nothing to see here, there's no concern. But think about this for a second. Have you ever updated your device to find out that some settings have changed? Yeah, that happens. So there's definitely a potential here for this to cause problems. And it comes down to the issue of trust and security. We need to be able to trust our devices. They're basically extensions of who we are at this point. How often do you find yourself without your phone? How often do you find yourself without your tablet or your computer? Do you end up using these devices for very secure types of communications? Let's say checking your bank account information, doing your taxes online, checking your health records. Notice how some of these things are financial and health related. There's a lot of regulations that go into that. It's a lot of privacy regulations. And considering the fact that it was just announced that Windows Wi-Fi drivers had a major vulnerability, in 8.8, yeah, trust is something that has to be earned. And Microsoft is not well known for their security measures. They're trying, they've attempted, but the reality is there's been exploits left and right. So now it's basically because of this that I believe that 2025 is going to be the year of Linux, where we're going to see lawyers, doctors, politicians, all running to Linux. It's going to be the smart thing to do because there's going to be a lot of information that you're not going to want to have shared with people who shouldn't be able to see it. And granted, if the information is being saved on your device, on your local computer, then theoretically nobody else should be able to have access to that. But again, there was a Wi-Fi vulnerability in the driver of Microsoft, of Windows itself. You know, if you're a lawyer, if you're a doctor, if you're just anyone who goes to a local establishment that has free Wi-Fi, there's the potential that your device can get infected. Then if you go home, if it's wormable, that means every other device on your network could also get infected. Now that's a very basic example. So yeah, I think lawyers, doctors, politicians, and basically everybody else will probably start having to use Linux if they want to have a greater level of privacy. Because think about it, if you're a lawyer, you're not going to want to have anybody else having access to your legal documents. If you're a doctor, you have HIPAA compliance or HIPAA regulations you have to deal with. If you're a politician, politics can get very dirty. You don't want your strategy, you don't want your campaign strategy, you don't want your opposition research, you don't want a lot of information to be out there. And basically anybody else who values privacy is going to want to make sure they monitor how this type of feature, how it functions. All right, so let's read down this list. And again, it's a very long list, so I'm going to have to read it, but I want to just touch on it and see what it actually means for us and what it means for Microsoft Recall. All right, so this is a comprehensive list. We have HIPAA, the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. It's about privacy, security, and breach notification rule. Basically, all of your medical information has to be secured. Privacy there matters a lot. All right, so the next one is data protection and privacy regulations, and there's a bunch of them that fall under this list over here. We have the GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation, that was enacted by the European Union. We have the California Consumer Privacy Act. We have the California Privacy Rights Act. We have the Personal Information Protection and Electronic Documents Act from Canada. We have the Brazilian General Data Protection Law, Protection of Personal Information Act, Personal Data Protection Act, Australian Privacy Principles, Data Protection Act of 2018, New Zealand Privacy Act of 2020, Japan's Act on the Protection of Personal Information, South Korea's Personal Information Protection Act, and then we have the Electronic Communication and Consumer Protection regulations. We have the Electronic Communications Privacy Act, the Telecommunications Interception and Access Act of 1979. We have the Consumer Protection Act. We have the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act. And then we have the Financial Services Regulations. We have the Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act. Then we have the Payment Card Industry Data Security Standards. And then the Sarbanes-Oxley Act. Then there's industry-specific regulations when it comes to Federal Information Security Management Act and then the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act. Then we have E-Privacy Directive, Network and Information Systems Directive, Freedom of Information Act, again the Sarbanes-Oxley Act, the Federal Trade Commission Act, the Personal Data Privacy Ordinance Act, and a whole bunch more. Yeah, that list is very long. So the lawyers over at Microsoft and basically anyone who's going to have an issue with Microsoft recall, they're going to be pretty busy. And we're going to see a lot of people bringing up or asking the question, how is my privacy guaranteed? Privacy is never guaranteed at this point. The reality is we share a lot of information with our devices. Our devices are synced up to the cloud, and we upload a lot of information to social media. So we willingly give away a lot of information. We're going to have to start rethinking our habits. We're going to start having to think about what we're sharing with our platforms online and what are we sharing with our devices. You might have to go back to just keeping a regular, journal on pen and paper. Now, a lot of people might say, this really doesn't apply to me. What do I have to be concerned about? I have nothing to hide. Now, the thing is, everybody has some private information. Let's think about it. Your social security number. Let's think about your bank information that you don't necessarily want shared with the world. Let's say some other information like your driver's license information. Yeah, a lot of these things you can take care of online. You can go to your DMV online and get a new driver's license. You can update a lot of information online. I believe you could even update your passport online as well. A lot of this stuff, a lot of this information in the wrong hands can cause issues with identity theft. And now let's say you're having a private conversation with somebody else that you don't necessarily want to be exposed to the world. We know that data leaks and exposures happen all the time. We hear about it in the news. So while there will be safeguards, I'm sure there's going to be some safeguards to make sure that this is going to comply with the vast majority of these regulations. Sometimes those safeguards could be undone. Sometimes they could be bypassed. Sometimes there's going to be a security issue within the code that allows somebody to work around it or tunnel under that security feature. Now, one thing you're going to hear about is the fact that this dates back several years. The fact that Apple previously was requested by the federal government to hand over all the data of a particular iPhone. Now, I'm not a legal expert. I'm not an attorney. I'm just a programmer. But basically, we know that some of these devices, they hold on to information. They hold on to data for an extended period of time. And with something like this type of feature being implemented on your Windows computer and probably in every single upcoming device that's going to be sold to all of us consumers, whether it's Apple, whether it's Microsoft, or any other type of device that has AI baked into it, there is the potential for it to store a significant amount of data. And think about this for a second. How is it actually going to work? If it's taking a screenshot of everything you're doing every 3 seconds and backing it up for 3 months, that's going to consume a significant amount of space, a lot of resources. In order for all that data to be processed, is there going to be a local AI on your device that's not directly connected to another server online in order to process all that data? Maybe they're going to do that. That's why they probably have the neural processing unit. But there's always the potential for that information to get leaked or backed up to the cloud. And if it gets backed up to the cloud, how secure is that? Can you delete that information? A lot of people make note of the fact that years ago, Facebook used to allow you to delete your photos, right? And you think it's deleted. But yeah, they flagged it as deleted. You wouldn't see it, but it would still live on within their systems. Again, like what I said in another video, possession is 9/10 of the law. And it goes back to this right here, the US Constitution. Now, I'm not a constitutional lawyer, but I do have the Constitution right here. And the Fourth Amendment says the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrant shall issue but upon probable cause. It goes on from there. But the reality is there is some level of privacy that's supposed to be guaranteed by our Constitution. Now, it's not spelled out directly, but we can see there's an effort to ensure that we have some semblance of privacy, and some cases that went before the Supreme Court have touched on this issue. Now, why am I concerned about this? What is it that I'm trying to protect? Well, I'm a programmer. I have proprietary code that I developed that I don't necessarily want to be shared elsewhere. I mean, think about it. Every major company, every major corporation, they have proprietary code, and they don't necessarily want everybody to have access to it as well. But again, if you're a lawyer, if you're a doctor, if you're an accountant, if you're a banker, if you're a politician, you got to think twice about your privacy. You got to think twice about your security. You got to think about What efforts can you put forward to secure your privacy? And what are all the holes? Now, this is a gaping hole right here because think about it for a second. For years, people who were in the business of trying to gain your information in an unauthorized way, they would develop keyloggers and they would try to get it onto your system. And what that would do is that it would literally log every single key that you type out, and then it would phone home and send all that data elsewhere. But a lot of those keyloggers aren't that effective nowadays, and they're often caught by some of the security scanners. But Microsoft Recall will be baked into your system. All it takes is one vulnerability, like the Windows Wi-Fi vulnerability, for someone to gain access to your computer. They can go into your settings. They can then turn that feature on and start logging all of your data. And of course, there might be some notification things, but we know that people can get creative. There could be a way to turn that notification off, that feature has been turned on. So yeah, I think 2025 is going to be the year of Linux. We're going to see a lot of people gravitating to it. Do I think it's going to end up having the majority market share? The answer is no. But the more people that become aware of the fact that these devices are basically scanning and monitoring everything that we do on a daily basis, we're probably going to see a growth in Linux operating systems and probably an investment in older type of computers that don't have the NPU chip installed. Now, does that mean that I'm never going to get a computer that has an NPU chip? Obviously, that's not the case. I'm going to end up eventually getting one. Why? Because we know that technology, after every 5 years or so, there are some applications and software that require the latest and greatest technology, right? So if I'm using Adobe Premiere Pro, if I'm using Photoshop, or if I'm using basically any type of application that requires significant hardware resources, I'm gonna have to update. I could use open source software, of course, but there's also going to be the issue of the fact that I like to create tutorials teaching people how to do things on Windows, on macOS, and on Linux. So yeah, I'll end up having to update, but I'm going to wait a while. I'm not rushing right now to get anything new. I was thinking about getting a new Windows computer. I was thinking about getting a new Mac. But as it stands now, I'm probably going to hold off, at least until I can get a better sense in how a lot of this stuff can be secured. So yeah, does Microsoft Recall break the law? I'm not a lawyer, I don't know, but I'm pretty sure a lot of lawyers are going to start looking at this, start analyzing it. A lot of governments are going to start looking at it. A lot of states are going to look at it, and they're going to ask the question, and let's see what answer we get back. So my advice to you, keep your eyes and your ears open. And as they say, trust but verify. All right, sound off down below. Let me know what you think about this topic. Let me know if you're going to be updating to a new device. There are some selling points to it. I don't want to, be bashing the technology 100% because there are some productivity benefits to it. But do those productivity benefits outweigh the cons? Sound off down below. Let me know. All right, so I'll see you in the next video.